Lizardmen here, and today we're doing another tier list using Tier Maker. This time we're covering every generic lord that you're able to recruit in Total War Warhammer 2. Now this isn't going to include any kind of like sub-legendary lord, or basically lords that you can get to a certain limit. These are ones you can just get unlimited of. This will also include DLC lords, which brings me to today's sponsor, which is Instant Gaming. So I've been sponsored by Instant Gaming for a while now, and I've actually used it a fair bit this week because I was a little bit bored and I wanted to get some Stellaris DLC because I haven't played Stellaris in a while. So I came onto Instant Gaming, and on Steam it was $30 per DLC because I was missing two. I was missing Federations and Nemesis, and I picked it up for essentially 60% off on Instant Gaming. And you can see here, this is my personal account here on Instant Gaming. I've never had an issue with them, and I've saved plenty of money. I don't buy a lot of games because I spend so much time on Warhammer 2, and of course I get most of my Warhammer 2 stuff for free. But other games that I do play in my spare time, Instant Gaming has just been great for that. And between October 29, which is today, and November 1st, there is a Halloween sale, so there is going to be even cheaper prices on Instant Gaming for you there. Just remember to keep an eye out for region-locked keys. But if you do manage to buy yourself a key that doesn't work, just refund it. Instant Gaming does have a really good refund policy. Another thing to note is that sometimes when you install a key, it doesn't immediately register it straight away. So exit out of Steam and then refresh. Don't be impatient with your key. If when you put in the key, it says it registered correctly, it registered correctly. Steam just sometimes takes a moment or two to collect itself, so don't just go into rage mode straight away. Anyway, Instant Gaming, great website. I use it myself. All right, now, on to the tier list. So, we're starting with the same settings as last time with the hero tier list, based around legendary difficulty campaign, very hard battles, no mods, no multiplayer, around ultra unit scale, although I really don't think the settings make that big of a difference. We're going to be taking a lot of things into account with lords, because sometimes lords might actually be good to recruit, but not good to command in your armies, and I'll go over details just due to like skill points and traits and things like that. I'll also point out when a specific lord is a DLC lord, and when I'm not entirely sure, because some of them are FLC lords and I'm just not entirely sure sometimes. Alright, starting with the Empire, and then going through to the Vampire Coast, just like the same time what we did with the hero tier list. Check down in the timeline to see exactly which one you want to see. There'll be like 15 timestamps. Okay, starting with the Empire. They've got three types of lords. The Huntsman does require the Hunter and the Beast DLC, and I'm actually not sure about this. I think the Archlector requires the Grim and the Grave DLC, because I think originally you were only able to recruit the Empire Lord. Alright, now starting with the Empire Lord, I'm going to put this guy at B tier. It's just a sort of standard lord. The main benefit that you've got with this sort of lord is that when they get to, I think, rank 16, I'm not entirely sure, they can get an Imperial Griffin mount, which makes them the best fighter out of the three, but it's not really like that much of a benefit in the early game. But, you know, it's a decent lord. They've got some decent skills. There's nothing particularly special about them. These guys really are the definition of generic. Now we move on to the Archlector. Now, a little while ago, I probably would have put this guy on C tier because he doesn't get any particularly good mount, and he's maybe just a little bit better of a fighter than the Empire General. However, now that they're able to boost global effects with certain skills in their skill line, you can recruit Archlectors, put points into their skill tree, and then disband them, and they provide global effects, such as Untainted plus 2 for all characters faction-wide, plus 10% success chance for, I think, Warrior Priests and Witch Hunters. That stuff is incredibly powerful, and just because of that, they're going to S tier. You don't need this guy to command your armies. You only need to be able to recruit them, I think, at tier 3 or 4. Recruit them, put the points in, disband them. Keep doing that every turn, and your Witch Hunters will never fail. And every single one of your characters will purge chaos out of their lands the moment they touch into it. So really, really useful character. Recruit them. You don't need to have them command your armies, but recruit loads of them. Okay. Next up is the Huntsman General. These guys here actually it's a bit of a weird thing with the Huntsman Generals. I'm going to put it at A tier because these guys are the best fighters for the early game. They've got really good range. They boost the most important units in your early game. They can boost the range of archers and give extra replenishment rate, extra campaign movement range. And these guys here will get more kills than these two guys here combined because they stalk and they have a missile weapon that's really good at sniping enemy lords and dishing out tons of damage. So these guys here in your early game are definitely what you want to be focusing on. However, in the late campaign, when you can actually recruit these guys already stocked with an Imperial Griffin, that is to say, when you can recruit them at ranks 14 or 16, something like that, then you might want to actually switch them out for a Griffin, because sometimes in the late campaign, a monster is actually better than an archer. But in the early game, an archer is better than, well, this guy would be on foot. Anyway, that's the Empire there. Now let's move on to the Dwarfs. Dwarfs don't really have a whole lot of choice. They've got more choice than some factions, but they've just got the Dwarf Lord and the Rune Lord. Dwarf Lord is going into B tier because he's just generic as fuck. He is just a fighter. It doesn't have any particularly good skills. Sometimes they can come with some good traits. Nothing particularly special about them. They're really sort of like an upgraded, slightly upgraded version of a Thane. Now, the Rune Lord, however, I'm going to put that at A tier, because where this guy drops down in terms of like melee stats, they're definitely not as good as holding the line as a regular Lord. This guy does come with at least some rune magic, so a spellcaster is always going to be a lot more valuable to you than just a standalone like tank. And this guy here isn't exactly that bad in melee, and he can get on an Anvil of Doom as well. All of that is quite useful, so I'm going to put it a step above the Rune Lord. But no S tier lords for the Dwarfs. They don't have any specific recruit traits that are like you'd have to get. There is the one of Grugny that will give you a bit of extra research rate, but reduced construction cost, but I wouldn't focus your campaigns around it too much. Okay, next up we got the Greenskins. Alright, first up we've got... Oh, hang on, the Rune Lord here. That might actually be a DLC Lord. I think I should have mentioned that. I think it is. I think it comes with the King and the Warlord DLC. I'm fairly sure about that, but not 100%. Okay. So moving on to the Greenskins. So their generic lord is just the Orc Warboss, which they're going into B tier. Pretty much the same sort of thing as an Empire Captain, but maybe a little bit better fighter. And then they get, when they get to fairly high rank, don't know exactly what level, 14, 16, 18, something like those lines, they can have a Wyvern. Now, I think a Griffin is actually a better mount than a Wyvern, but these guys do have better melee stats. I think the Griffin's just a bit faster, more versatile, that kind of stuff. It does come with poison attack as well. But yeah, while this guy's on foot, not really that useful, especially if you're playing on very hard battle difficulty. Then we've got the Goblin Warboss here. Actual crap. Doesn't get a mount. They're not good fighters. The only benefit that these guys have is that they can boost goblin units. And guess what? You have other things to do that. The Great Goblin Shaman can do everything that this guy here can do, except this guy is arguably one of your best spellcasters. But we'll get to him in a minute. So I think the Goblin Warboss is actually a DLC Lord. I think it comes with Skarsnik, with the King and the Warlord DLC. So if you're looking to get this Lord and you don't have it already, it's not a high priority in my opinion. I'm fairly sure about that. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I might get a few things wrong about this because it's been such a long time since I've had this DLC. Since I got the DLC, that is. So I can't really remember when this guy came in. And then we've got the Great Goblin Shaman. Now, I feel like this guy isn't a DLC Lord, but I'm actually not entirely sure because there is some stuff. There's like FLC that the Great Goblin Shaman can get, specifically with the Arachnarok Spider mount. Now, before that mount, I probably would have put this guy in C tier as well. However, with that mount, I'm putting him up to S tier because this guy here can be recruited with the knowledgeable trait, so recruiting them and then disbanding them can give you extra winds of magic. Now, them on, I think you get them at rank 18, again, not sure about that. Whenever you can get them, you get them on an Arachnarok mount. It reduces their Winds of Magic cost for the little war spells. So having this guy run around and thin out enemies with really cheap Curse of the Bad Moon is really useful because they're actually quite fast on that. You could also put them on a wolf mount and you can generate loads of Winds of Magic with them. So they're a really good mount and they do have a good trait for you to recruit. So highly recommended that if you're going to command an army without using a legendary lord, the Great Goblin Shaman is the way to go. And make sure you get that FLC, which I think you need to get from Total War Access for the Arachnarok's mount, because that's really good. It's what makes all the difference here. All right, moving on to the vampire accounts. So I'm not going to talk about the Bloodline Lords too much. I will just briefly mention them, that this is the order that I prefer the Bloodline Lords in. I prefer the Lamian Lords the most. I just find them to just be the most versatile. Then I prefer the Von Karstein ones. Then the Blood Dragon. Then the Necrarch. And way down at the bottom, the Strigoi. Strigoi Bloodline is by far the worst. The only time I really want to focus on the Strigoi Bloodline is really to get the passive bonuses. You can get 3 of each, and you can get a little bit more if you confederate. There's a little bit of a trick at the moment with the Red Duke. What you can do, this comes at a cost doing this. If you go to war with the Red Duke at Mousillon or wherever he is, and you vassalize him, so you attack him and vassalize him and beat him, right? And the army that shows up in the vassalized city, the last city that they're remaining in, will have a Blood Dragon Bloodline Lord there. And you could then attack it again, and you can basically keep giving Mousillon more and more Blood Dragons, because it's the first thing they'll recruit. In one of my campaigns, I've actually managed to have them recruit about 20 Bloodline Lords, and then I confederated them straight after. So then I got something like 25 Blood Dragon Bloodline Lords. You can do that with the other Vampire Count factions, but it's a bit more random with them, whereas with Mousillon, they always recruit a Bloodline Lord, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, that's enough for the Bloodlines. That was a bit more than briefly, but anyway. Alright, talking about the generic Vampire Lords. So, you've got the regular Lord here. I'm going to put him at A tier. No, I'm going to put him at S tier, because you need to rely on this guy so heavily. Your Lord is your most important unit in any of your armies with the Vampire counts. He's going to be doing all the heavy lifting, and out of the 3 generic lords, this is the one you definitely want to recruit. The reason why I was a little bit hesitant to mention him is because he doesn't have the knowledgeable trait available to him, whereas this guy here does. But in terms of spellcasting abilities, this guy here is way better than a Goblin Shaman, because its vampire magic is just so useful. These guys have really good useful mounts. They've got what I prefer on the Hellsteed and the Dragon. I usually get them both of their mounts. So what I do is, if it's a field battle, I put them on the Hellsteed, because, especially if there's lots of missile units. If there's no missile units, I put them on a dragon. The reason for that is because even though dragons have more health, dragons are big and kind of slow. It's very difficult to dodge shots, but on a Hellsteed, they're really, really quick. Even if they've got a lot less health, they just don't get hit anywhere near as often, so I find them a lot more durable in those situations. But I put them on a dragon if it's a siege battle, because I want the siege attacker. Okay, Strigoi are D-ranked lords. They suck. They're only useful in the early part of the campaign because they are armor-piercing lords that have regen right from turn 1 at rank 1, but they have absolutely no potential to build upon, because their spellcasting ability sucks. They don't get Arcane Conduit. Their mount options, they eventually get a Terrorgeist, but you can get a Zombie Dragon here, which is arguably better. So my recommendation is basically just don't bother with Strigois unless you actually need a good fighter in your army, because at tier 1 they are better fighters than Vampire Lords, but they are not better spellcasters, and I don't recommend leveling them up. Even the Bloodline Lords suck. Anyway, then we've got the Master Necromancer here. Now the Master Necromancer, I'm going to put it at A tier, but I usually don't have these guys command armies. This guy here can get the knowledgeable trait. Also, what I like to do with them is I like to recruit them at rank 3, at minimum rank 3, and put a couple of points into the blue line, which increases the capacity. I think I need to recruit them at rank 4, actually. Increases the capacity of vampires. So not only am I recruiting knowledgeable, but I'm also increasing capacity of vampires. Now, these guys here, they're pretty much just as good spellcasters as the as a Vampire Lord. But what I prefer to do is have a Vampire Lord attach a Necromancer, just a regular hero Necromancer, not have a Necromancer attach a Necromancer. So you can kind of have the dual effect. Basically anything that this guy here can do can also be pretty much done with a regular Necromancer. These guys here can get flying mounts as well, but I just feel like because they're not as good in melee, they don't have as much armor, you're still better off with a Vampire Lord. That's the reason why I put it A tier. You certainly can use them, but I think you get better use out of Vampire Lords. Moving on to the Warriors of Chaos, we've got the Chaos Lord, which goes at B tier. There's nothing particularly special about this. This guy can get the Infernal Dominance trait, which is preferable, but if you're going to go for a Lord to command your armies, I would highly recommend getting a Chaos Sorcerer, because spellcasting is way better. These guys here can get dragons, and they can get the Knowledgeable trait. These guys are actually going to S tier, and they can get the Infernal Dominance as well. They're just not quite as good in melee, but their magic capabilities will more than make up for it. And since the Warriors of Chaos will have a limited number of spellcasters that they can recruit, every additional spellcaster will make a big difference. And this guy's here capability can easily be compensated for by a Exalted Hero. So there's just nothing particularly special about a Chaos Lord. But he is a good fighter. He definitely doesn't need to go down to D. Alright, moving on to the Beastmen. We've got the regular Beast Lord going to B. Okay, so these guys here don't get flying mounts. They can have some pretty good traits, and they can get either the Tuskor or Razorgore Chariot. They're decent fighters, but there's nothing particularly special about them, so I'm going to leave it at B tier. Then we got the Doom Bull. The Doom Bull... Oh, hang on, I forgot to mention, the Strigoi is actually a DLC Lord. I'm bad with keeping up with that. Yeah, the DLC... Yeah, that one's a DLC Lord. I don't think the Master Necromancer is. I think they were available at launch. I can't remember. Okay, so yeah, the this one here isn't a DLC. Well, you do need the original Beastmen DLC, or you just need one of the Beastmen DLCs actually to be able to get a Beast Lord. Then you've got the Doom Bull here. The Doom Bull requires you to get the recent one, the Silence and the Fury DLC. I'm going to put this one at A tier because they are much better fighters than the Beast Lords. But their capabilities are compensated for by like their prowess in battle is fine to just get like a Gore Bull. So I usually don't have my armies commanded by Doom Bulls, but you can if you want to. What I like to do with my Beastmen armies is actually get the Great Brave Shaman. Yeah, this guy here is going to S tier. Because of all the things that you can do to reduce their Winds of Magic cost, and the fact that they get a chariot mount, just as much as this guy here, they can be decent in melee while also being a really good spellcaster, and they can also have bound spells, which can generate a, what's it called? The Savage Dominion spell. It spawns a Cygor, that's it, and that doesn't require Winds of Magic. These guys here don't get that. And you could give them another item to do that as well, but they get that in their skill tree. And they can reduce Winds of Magic cost. So actually better spellcasters than the heroes that you can recruit. These guys here do not get the Knowledgeable trait though, so you have to get the Knowledgeable trait through the heroes that the Beastmen get. This Lord here, I think, is FLC. That came with the Silence and the Fury. I don't think both of these, because I know they both came in at the same time. This one's the DLC and that one's FLC, I believe. Okay, moving on to the Woodelves. Okay, so the Treeman Lords are S tier, just so good. These Tree Lords are not only amazing fighters, they can be good spellcasters. They give good buffs to units around them. They've got good traits available to them. Just an amazing general type. And they're siege attacker as well, so they're really useful in the early game. And in the late campaign. So, the only thing they don't get is Knowledgeable. But you can get your Knowledgeable with Woodelves through your Spellweavers. So they're also going into S tier here. The great thing about the Woodelves is that because they have 5 laws of magic that they can recruit from, there is almost always a knowledgeable lord available to recruit. It's basically 50-50 chance at any given time for a new knowledgeable one to show up if there's a place available. So as the Woodelves, as long as they're not playing as Draca, because she doesn't get these lords here, you can continuously keep increasing the amount of winds of magic perpetually, as long as you've got the money to recruit them. They're also good generals. I'd still prefer Treeman Lords. They're just way better in melee, and their spellcasting abilities maybe just a little bit less than the Spellweavers, but the Spellweavers are providing all the winds of magic that they need. And these guys here, if you put them in the trees, they get the bonus. It's basically extra arcane conduits as long as they're in trees. Just super strong army general if you're going to go with the Treeman. As for this one, whatever, it can work. And then you've got the regular Glade Lord. Glade Lords, I'm just going to put it at B tier. They're good. I mean, they've got good mounts they can get on a Great Eagle or a Dragon. They've got archery ability. They're decent in melee. They're okay. It's just that I feel like these ones here are better. That's all. So it just comes down to your personal preferences, I feel. Okay, then we move on to Bretonnia. So we've got the generic Bretonian Lord and the Prophetess. So, I should have mentioned, this one here is DLC. I'm pretty sure this one's DLC, not FLC. So that came with the Twisted and Twilight. Okay, so there's no DLC in the Bretonnia ones. That's just an FLC race. Okay, so the Bretonian Lord, I'm going to put that at A tier, actually, because these guys here, because of the vows, it kind of makes them a cut above. These are the B tier ones here. I find that with Bretonnia, I don't need magic quite as much, just because I usually have so many armies because they don't have supply lines, and I tend to prefer putting a lord in charge just because I like these guys holding the line, and giving these guys their various vows it makes them really good fighters. When you get them the Grail vow, they have perfect vigor, really good stats, lots of extra campaign movement range, just really, really good. And while the Prophetess is good as well, I'm also going to put it at A tier because good spellcaster. I just feel like they're just both good. With Bretonnia, you don't need to Doomstack because you don't have supply lines. You don't need to worry about that sort of restriction. So you're a lot more flexible in what you want to do with them. Both of their lords are good. In the early game, though, I do like to have them team up. Because there's no supply lines, I'll recruit 3 Bretonian lords. Well, more like 2 Bretonian lords, my legendary lord, and a Prophetess of Life. So this one here heals the other 3 while they hold the line back, and I don't recruit any melee infantry because they're rubbish. Alright, moving on to Norsca. Norsca's only got one generic lord, the Marauder Chieftain. And this one here is actually going to A tier, because as a lord goes, this one here is pretty good. This guy at low tier isn't particularly useful, but when they get to, I think, rank 18, they get a motherfucking mammoth to ride on, which makes them super strong. In addition to that, in their skill tree, every single Marauder Chieftain can have regen, or other things, depending on what you want. They've got a fairly bland skill tree. They can, I think, get Infernal Dominance. I think another thing to point out here, this one doesn't get Knowledgeable. But these ones here become absolute killing machines as they get leveled up. But apart from that, they're pretty basic. They're just good fighters, better fighters than these guys here. Alright, moving on to the High Elves now. We've got the... Okay, so we've got Prince, Princess, and the High Archmage. Sorry, the Archmage, which are not just High Magic. But anyway. Alright, now, here's the thing about this. All 3... variants of the High Elves are going into S tier for various different reasons. The High Elves are arguably one of the most versatile races in the game, okay, and their traits are amazing. So, with the Princes, what you want to be getting is the Dragon-Willed trait, okay. Now the Princes, they are good fighters, they can ride dragons, and they don't have a bow and arrow. The Dragon Will trait will make dragons cheaper and stronger in this person's army. So if you want to go with a dragon army, then you want to go with the Prince. If you want to go with an archer army, then you might want to go with a punitive or resistant princess. These ones here are archers, so you can put them on a dragon or on an eagle, I think, and they perform really well in combat. And they're also boosting their army a lot. Punitive is a really powerful trait because it strips enemies, the local enemies, of their missile resistance. So if you've got lots of archers, that's going to be really useful. Missile resistance can't go below 0%, so it's mainly useful for getting rid of missile resistance from heroes, which all heroes and lords have some missile resistance, with like a couple of exceptions. Okay, another great thing about both of these lords is that you can cheese them in a way to boost your economy infinitely. Okay, so if you recruit them at sufficient level, so between 10 and 13, if you dedicate them to Vol, you can increase the amount of money, or Mathlan actually, depends on which one you want. I usually go with Vol because it depends on which stage of the campaign. But anyway, if you go with Vol, it's 1% extra income from industry. If you go with Mathlan, it's 1% extra income from ports. Now that might not seem like very much, but if you're also doing the economy cheese with the entrepreneurs, then the tax rates of all of the provinces should be going up into the hundreds of percent, right? Now the thing is, that stacks on that 1%. So if you're at 300% tax rate, then 1% extra bonus on the ports actually translate to 3%. Now that might not seem like much, but you stack it infinitely and it really starts to add up. In addition to that, these guys here can also increase the amount of trade goods that you have in their blue line infinitely. And in the second stage of their blue line, they can increase your research rate. So if you're able to recruit these guys at rank 13 or whatever, 12 or 13, you can be increasing your base income, you can increase your tradable goods, and you can increase your research rate. Usually by around turn 100, I have about 1,000% research rate, so I'm almost done with my tech tree, just because I just recruit tons of these. Now, of course, that's a lot of cheese, but it's there available for you if you want it. You don't have to do it. Now, the Archmage, this one here is a DLC Lord. It comes with the Warden and Paunch. So this one's an S tier Lord because it's an amazing spellcaster. This is the Lord that you want to recruit if you're not making doom stacks, basically. If you're just building armies for emergencies or whatever, this is an amazing Lord. Doesn't really have the capabilities that the other two have for increasing your economy quite as much. You can dedicate it to Vol or Mathlan if you want to, but this is they can cast spells cheaper than regular heroes, and they can have really good mounts, so a flying mount, whereas the regular heroes don't get that. So really useful in a desperate situation where you just need to recruit a Lord straight away. A single Archmage Lord that you recruit at high level later on in the campaign, in addition to the garrison, can save your city. So really useful in that sort of situation. So High Elves have very good Lord choices. Then we move on to the Dark Elves. So this one here is the crossbow variant of the Dreadlord, and this one here is the sword and shield variant. Both of these I'm going to put at B tier. There's very little difference between them. It really just comes down to melee or missile. They just don't really have like that much speciality between them. It largely just depends on what name of power that you get, but the other ones can get the exact same name of powers as well. So in terms of combat potential, that's really all that comes down for them, and it's kind of average, which is why they're going into B tier. Then we've got the Supreme Sorceress here. They are going into A tier. They're nowhere near as good as those ones. I'm going to put them at A tier. They're very useful for sure. Probably the ones I would prefer to get, because they're really good spellcasters, but they don't get the knowledgeable trait, and they do get flying mounts. But your regular wizards, the ones that you can recruit, they get the knowledgeable trait, and they get flying mounts as well. So this is less needed than the archmages for the high elves. The high elf mages, a significant difference between the actual hero, whereas this one here has a less significant. This one here also gets that shadow spell. I can't pronounce it. That is just bound, so it's a bit of an extra spell. But yeah, they don't get greater arcane conduits, whereas this one here get arcane conduit at rank 1. But otherwise, good spell. I'm fairly sure this is a DLC Lord as well. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. That it comes with the the Queen and the Crone. Then we've got the Beastmaster here. I'm also going to put this one at A tier, and it really comes down to how you're going to specialize your army. So you want to give your army a Beastmaster if you're going to use monsters, because they've got a bunch of buffs that make monsters a whole lot better. They're really good fighters, they don't have any magic abilities, but it really just comes down to just what they can do to boost their army. But I feel like in terms of what the Dark Elves are capable of, you rely a little bit less on their lords than you do with the High Elves, just because the High Elves just get such amazing traits, whereas these ones here, they do get good traits, but nowhere near as good as what the High Elves can get. Alright, so let's move on to the Lizardmen now. Let's organize this a little bit. Alright, let's talk about Saurus Oldblood first. I'm going to put this one at S tier, but the funny thing is that I usually don't have these command my armies. The reason I'm putting it S tier, though, is because if you recruit them and get them to rank 20, you can give them Honored Elder, which gives them extra public order faction wide. So you can get them to rank 20 and then just disband them and then just start up a new one to give yourself essentially infinite public order if that is going to be an issue for you. That's probably a lot of effort because it's not so easy to get recruit ranks for your Saurus Oldblood. Maybe I'll put it down to A tier because you can also do that with Scar Veterans, and it's honestly easier with them. They can of course get a Carnosaur mount, which is really good, but the Oldblood is not my preferred lord for the Lizardmen, but it depends on what you want. Next up is the red-crested Skink Chief. So this one here I think is a DLC lord that came with the Prophet and Warlock. I'm going to pop this one down at D tier because it, in my opinion, is kind of crap. Anything it can do, other units can do better. This is a skink booster, which I don't give a shit about boosting skinks, especially in the late campaign. And it's a melee lord. You can get some good mounts, but there's like the heroes that are available to Lizardmen can get anything that this one can get. Basically, it's kind of redundant. Now there is a special lord that Tehenowin can get, like a special red-crested skink chief that can get like a really good trait that can boost the army. I'm not talking about that one. That's a really good lord, but that's not a generic lord, and that's only available to Tehenowin, so I didn't include it here. But I just want to make a big distinction that this one here is a piece of crap, but the ones Tehenowin can get, those are really good. And then we've got the Slan. I love Slans. Slans are great. So I usually go with Life Slans or Fire Slans. Now I considered this one a generic lord because you can get unlimited of them. You just have to awaken them first. And usually I'm awakening more than what I need in any particular campaign. Because as a Lizardman, I tend not to have 50 armies by turn 10. So I usually have a plentiful supply of Slans. You can recruit these guys at maximum level, as in rank 39, really early on by building Star Chambers. They're really good spellcasters. Just terrible in melee, but it's really all about supporting the army that you're going to build, because these guys have a ton of abilities. They can come with bound banishment spells. Life ones are the ones I usually prefer for my armies because I usually build dinosaur armies. So their life magic is really good because they generate tons of magic. They've got virtually no miscast chance, and they've got a special Slan force field to help protect them as well. So really useful general. They've become maybe a little bit less like essential with the addition of the Skink Oracle, because at least the Skink Oracle can now replace that one as the healer in the army, because that was before the only way you could heal your dinosaurs was with that life magic. But they are still, in my opinion, superior to the Oldblood, even though of course they're terrible in melee. These guys do come with, they can get regeneration, so they can be fairly tanky. The biggest problem is of course protecting them, because the AI does tend to go straight for them because they see it as a big fat target. But understandably so, they're very powerful. Alright, moving on to the Skaven. Alright, so... Alright, we got the Warlord here. This is the regular one that doesn't require any DLC. Then we've got a Grey Seer, doesn't require DLC. I think the Master Assassin requires the Shadow and Blade DLC. And the Warlock Master requires the Prophet and Warlock DLC. I'm fairly sure about that. Okay, so we'll start with the Warlord. I'm going to put the Warlord at S tier, okay? Now, I usually don't have my armies commanded by Warlords unless the army is going to be a Brood Horror Doom stack, which I do like to build, but just don't build all of my armies around that. Because these guys here can ride a Brood Horror now, but you actually need to have the DLC in order for them to ride a Brood Horror. Just keep that in mind. If you don't have the Clan Molder DLC, this guy here can't ride a Brood Horror. So I guess this here is dependent on you having the DLC. Otherwise, I'd still put it at S tier, because there's another reason. So what I like to do with Skaven Warlords is you want to recruit it at rank 13. It doesn't take that long. There's various technologies and buildings that you can build to increase your recruit rank of Warlords. And various skills, like Snitch has a skill that can increase the recruit rank of Lords. Once you get them to rank 13, you put 2 points into Ravenous Expansion, right? And what that does, it got nerfed a hell of a lot a while ago, but it used to be really good. And anyway, it's still good now. It provides you with, I think, 4 growth faction-wide. Growth doesn't mean shit to the Skaven if you're playing it correctly, because you just use food for growth. And it provides, I think, 4% extra income from their main settlement building, faction-wide. So you recruit them, you put 2 points into Ravenous Expansion, and then you equip them with a Hell Pit Attendant, so they get extra research rate, which is another thing entirely, so I'm not going to go into that right now. And then you just disband them, and you just do that every single turn. And now, it might not seem like it's a lot, but it's a way to infinitely just keep increasing your economy. And when you've got a fair number of settlements, these guys here can make you several thousand extra each per turn. So highly recommend doing that if you want to cheese your economy, because that is how you cheese the Skaven economy for the most part. Then we've got Grey Seers. I love Grey Seers. Grey Seers are S tier in my opinion. Now, in the early stages of the campaign, I like to recruit Ruin, because Warped Lightning is more useful in the early stages of the campaign than Pestilent Breath. However, in the later stages of the campaign, Plague overtakes Ruin, in my opinion, and then I like to get Plague Grey Seers. So Plague Grey Seers are basically like a Plague Priest, except they can they get a slightly different mount, and one of their spells is different. They get the Dreaded 13th, which can summon a Storm Vermin instead of the Pestilent Birth, which summons a unit of Plague Monks. And also that the Dreaded 13th also causes an explosion if you time it right and aim it right. So yeah, the Plague Grey Seers, I oftentimes, if I'm able to recruit them at high enough level, I just recruit a Plague Grey Seer and have them deal with like ambushes of dwarfs as they're invading, and I can fairly reliably wipe out an entire dwarf army in the late campaign just with one Grey Seer. These guys here also get access to the knowledgeable trait, making them really effective to just keep recruiting more of them to get that knowledgeable stuff, because that's one of the ways that they can just keep infinitely increasing their Winds of Magic. Really good lord. Also, with Grey Seers, when they get to rank 13, you can give them Envoy of the Council, which gives 10 extra relations with all Skaven. So Grey Seers at rank 13 are really useful for confederating the other Skaven, especially Ikiclaw, because Ikiclaw does not like to confederate, unless you're playing as Ikiclaw, in which case don't worry about it. So Grey Seers are really good. Next up we have the Assassins. Assassins, I'm going to put it at C tier because I don't get them. Assassins are only useful in the early game if magic is going to be totally useless to you. Let's just say you're going up against single entities, or something that Warp Lightning or Pestilent Birth is going to do. Sorry, not Pestilent, but Pestilent Breath is going to do like no damage to, like usually single entities. So in that case, if you need somebody to just be a good fighter, the Master Assassins are good for that. The other thing that Master Assassins can be very useful for is if you're playing as Clan Eshin, you can recruit a couple of Master Assassins and do shadowy dealings, and that way you don't even have to have them on the playing field or paying them at all, and they can just be doing your shadowy dealings in the background, so they're quite useful for that. So only for Clan Eshin do I really bother recruiting a lot of them. For everyone else, every now and again I'll get one, but I usually don't have my army with them. They do have an increased ambush success chance, but I usually use heroes to boost my ambush success chance up to 100%. And in my opinion, this guy here not being as good of a spellcaster or as good as a warrior at high level as these two, just sort of puts them behind. Next up, we've got the Warlock Master. I'm going to put this one here at S tier because it's a great spellcaster, also really good in melee. This is one of two possible commanders for weapons teams. I usually go with Grey Seers of Plague, just because I really like to use those Vermintides, but you can totally have this guy here instead, because this guy here can reduce the upkeep cost of certain weapons teams, and they're Law of Ruin, and they could just do a good job. They're decent in melee on a either on a Doom Flayer or a Doom Wheel. I prefer Doom Flayer, it makes them smaller so it's harder to hit. Basically a weaker version of Ichor Claw. And yeah, actually significantly weaker than Ichor Claw. In terms of like any sort of cheesiness they can do, you can give them something that can reduce the construction cost in a region, but it's not something that I found was particularly useful, so I really wouldn't worry about it too much. But apart from that, they are a really good lord. Okay, moving on to Tomb Kings. Tomb Kings don't have much going for them. It's just got the Tomb King Lord. I'm going to put it at A tier because they don't have any other option, for one thing. And they do get a Cambrian War Sphinx mount or a Chariot mount. I don't ever really talk about horse mounts because horses suck in this game for the most part. Those are the two mount options that I would go for. I really like the Cambrian War Sphinx as a mount. I think it's really powerful, on par with like Lizardmen monsters. So that's the primary reason I'm putting the... Oh, hang on, I almost forgot. The Canopic Jar Cheese. So recruiting these guys at rank 5, you go down the blue line, go into Canopic Jar Hoarder, and then just disband them. Now, because there's no other options for the Tomb Kings, I'm just going to put it at A tier, because I just don't feel like it's quite on par with these guys here. But yeah, the Canopic Jar Hoarder, it just makes 3 Canopic Jars per turn, and then you can disband them, just keep doing that infinitely. It doesn't cost you anything to recruit them. You just, yeah, and you can get your recruit rank up to 39 with them quite easily. And getting loads of Canopic Jars has lots of benefits. So yeah, moving on to the Vampire Coast. So they've got a few different variants with their lords. It's all fleet captains. They have 3 different laws of magic that they can recruit from: Death, Vampires, and Deep. And then of those laws of magic, they also get either a Pistol Lord or a Halberd Lord. So the way that I've structured this is that this one here is the Pistol Lord, and this one is the Halberd Lord. And in terms of whatever law of magic, well then, that's up to you. I usually go with either Vampire or Deep. I don't go with Death. So, I'm going to prioritize the Pistol Lord over the Halberd Lord. And then you basically just got a fleet captain. So, they can have a Rotting Promethean mount if you want, which is an awful mount. I don't recommend it at all. They are okay spellcasters. They don't have any particularly amazing abilities. A lot of what they can do is can also be done by just a generic hero for them, the fleet captain. So these guys here really don't distinguish themselves from their heroes at all. I'm putting them up as these tiers because Vampire magic is just bloody strong. Same thing with Deep magic, and that's what really makes him a cut above. And again, he's got a missile attack, which is better than being in melee, especially if you're playing on very hard battle difficulty. Missile attacks are more useful. But apart from that, there's just nothing that special about them. But anyway, that's the Lord tier list. A lot of them at S tier, a lot at A tier, few at B tier, hardly any C tier, and a couple at D tier. So basically, D tier ones, I just never recruit these guys, and C tier ones, basically never recruit them. B tier, sometimes recruit. A tier, almost always recruit some. And S tier, I'm recruiting these guys like crazy because they have so many benefits for the campaign. Anyway, that's my tier list there. I think I got all the DLC ones, I think. But sometimes that stuff can be really hard to remember where it all goes. But if I got anything wrong, please feel free to let me know in the comments, because I wasn't super confident about what DLC goes where with some of them. Anyway, that's the end of this one here. Guys, don't forget to check out Insta Gaming if there's some DLC that you for whatever game that you're missing. Like, I get some great deals on there. Anyway, that's the end of this one. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time, fuckers. Bye.